Okay guys, let me explain again to you about this case under the communication of proposal. Right, so what happened in the case of Regina against Clark? Okay, start of the case, the Western Australian government offered a reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of persons responsible for the murder of 2 police officers. X and Clark were arrested and charged with murders, but shortly after Clark gave information which led to the arrest of another person, Y. X and Y were later convicted for the offence and Clark, who did not commit the murders, claimed the reward. So in your opinion, do you think that Clark is able to claim the reward from the Australian government? The court held that the court refused to grant his claim. Why? Because the information was given to clear himself from the murder charge and not in reliance on the offer of reward. As I mentioned just now, the rule of communications of proposal, the acceptor who is going to accept the proposal must aware of the existence of such proposal. But in this case, Clark is not aware because he gave the information in order to clear himself from the murder charge. Alright, next. Okay, we continue with the second element of a valid contract under the element of acceptance. Alright, so this is the final expressions of assent to the terms of a proposal, and the legal definitions of acceptance can be seen in section 2 subsection B of the Contracts Act. When the person to whom the proposal is made signifies his assent thereto, the proposal is said to be accepted. Signifies meaning that once he agreed, when he accepts the offer, the proposal, then there was complete acceptance. Okay, when there was complete acceptance, meaning there was a contract. So a proposal once accepted becomes a promise and agreement comes into being. Based on section 2, subsection C calls the person accepting the proposal as the promisee. And sometimes we call the person as acceptor. Okay? Okay, in order to make a valid acceptance, there are 3 rules governed under the Contracts Act. First rule is an absolute. There must be an absolute and unqualified acceptance. Second rule is acceptance must be made within a reasonable time and the acceptance must be communicated. Alright, first we discuss on the first rule of acceptance. The acceptance must be an absolute and unqualified acceptance. The rule is stated under section 7, subsection A of the Contracts Act. In order to convert a proposal into a promise, the acceptance must be absolute and unqualified. So what is meant by these terms, absolute and unqualified? The acceptance must be made on exactly the same terms as proposed without any modifications or variations. So just take note that the acceptance must be made without any modification, without any variation, changes to its original term. So what if there is modification or variation in the original proposal? If there is any modifications or variation of the proposal, it does not constitute an acceptance, but it may amount to a counter proposal or counter offer. Later on, when you come across the term counter offer, it it means a counter proposal where there is changes, okay, or variations or modification in the original offer or proposal. So what is the effects of counter proposal? It amounts to rejections of the original proposal. It means that the original proposal is destroyed by the counter offer. Example of case for counter offer is in a case of height against range. The first of the case, the defendant offered to sell his estate to the plaintiff on June 6 for £1,000. On June 8, in reply, plaintiff made a counter proposal to purchase the estate at £950. So this statement called as counter offer or counter proposal because the plaintiff and the one who will accepting the offer change the price of the estate. Okay, because he want to purchase it at the £950. On June 27, the defendant refused to accept this offer, and 2 days later, the plaintiff wrote to the defendant that he was prepared to pay £1,000. So later, he agreed to pay £1,000 to the defendant. Then the defendant refused, and the plaintiff sued for specific performance. So in this case, we need to determine whether there is a valid contract between them, whether the acceptance is a complete between defendant and plaintiff. Court held that there is no acceptance because the plaintiff later on its June had rejected the original proposal which could not be revived because on its June year plaintiff already made counter proposal. Just now I explained to you the effects of counter proposal. It will destroy the first proposal. It will destroy the original proposal made by the defendant. So basically there is no acceptance and there is no contract between them. Okay. However, later you may find this case, Stevenson against McLean. You may contrast this case with height against range, whereby in this case there is a general rule stated that a proposal is not rejected merely by a seeking or requesting for further information. Okay, for example, let's say in the situations, okay, when Ali, okay, offered to sell to Abu his car for 50,000 ringgit. Okay, let's say Abu asked Ali whether Ali will accept payment made by installment. So this is the question. This is an inquiry. Okay, replied by Abu to Ali, and this is not amounting to counter proposal. Okay. So later please read this case. Okay guys, the second rule of acceptance is it must be made within a reasonable time. Based on section 6 subsection B of the Contracts Act, a proposal is revoked by the lapse of the time prescribed or if no time is so prescribed by the lapse of reasonable time without communication of the acceptance. So what amount to reasonable time? Reasonable time is depends on the circumstances of the case, or it depends on the nature of the subject matter or the method by which the offer is communicated. Okay, example of case you may refer to case of a Macon Works and Trading's member Hyde against Pang Hon Ting, whereby the rationale of this rule stated that offer will lapse after a reasonable time not because this must be implied in the offer, but because failure to accept within a reasonable time implies rejections by the offeree. So if there is no time prescribed in the proposal, you must accept the offer within a reasonable time. So reasonable time is depends on the condition of the case, subject matter of the case. Okay. Okay, the third rule of acceptance that it must be communicated. Okay, the general rule stated that acceptance must be communicated to the proposer or offerer for there to be a binding contract. So the acceptor must communicate to the proposer of his acceptance. Okay, manner and mode of communication based on section 7, subsection B. An acceptance must also be ordinarily communicated and made in some usual manner if no method of acceptance is prescribed. If in the proposal itself stated the method of acceptance, then acceptor must follow the manner, must follow the instructions given in the proposal. So it can be made either in writing, okay, orally, or combination of these methods. Okay. So you may refer to section 3 of the contracts. Right? Okay, communication of the acceptance can be made by any of these methods. Okay, next question is whether silence is amount to an acceptance. Okay, what if you just keep silence and whether your silence here is amount to an acceptance? You will find the answer in the case of Flat House against Bingley, 1862. Okay, next, when is the communication of acceptance complete? According to the general rule, an acceptance is completely communicated when it is actually brought to the notice or comes to the actual knowledge of the offerer. So, the acceptor must notify to the proposer that he already accept the offer. Okay, so it must actually brought to the notice or comes to the knowledge of the proposer. Okay, however, there is one exception to this rule known as the postal rule communication. So what is the postal rule communication? This is the concept based on section 4, subsection 2, and exceptions to the general rule of communication of acceptance where the parties have intended the use of the post as a means of communications. When both parties decided to use post service as a means of communication, then they are bound to follow this rule, postal rule. So, when we apply the postal rule communications, the communication of an acceptance is complete. First, when it is against the proposer under section 4, subsection 2a, when it is put in a course of transmission to him, so as to be out of the power of the acceptor. In the simple words, when the letter of acceptance is posted to the proposer. Okay, maksudnya in a way that, okay, in a course of transmissions, when you already posted a letter of acceptance to the proposer, at that moment there is a complete acceptance against the proposer because you cannot do anything because you already posted the letter of acceptance. And under section 4, subsection 2b, as against the acceptor when it comes to the knowledge of the proposer. So, acceptor, it against acceptor when the letter of acceptance reach to the proposer. When it comes to the knowledge of the proposer, when the letter of acceptance received by proposal. Okay, so you must remember this rule for the postal rule communication. Example of case for a postal rule communication is a case of Adams against Linsell. In this case, the defendant wrote to the plaintiff offering to sell wool on certain terms. And the defendant, however, misdirected the letter and it reached the plaintiff later than usual. And upon receiving the letter of offer, the plaintiff immediately posted his acceptance. And meanwhile, the defendant, thinking that the plaintiff was not interested in the offer, had already sold the wool to a third party. So we need to identify whether there is a complete acceptance made between parties. Yes, court held that acceptance was complete upon posting. Okay, back to the previous rule on the postal rule communications. At the moment, the acceptor posted his acceptance, then there was a complete acceptance and there was a complete contract against the proposer. What is the rationale behind of this rule? Okay, the rationale is that it evolved from the reasons or practical convenience arising from delay that is inevitable in delivering letters. So offerer, he is the one who choose to start negotiations by post, meaning that he is the one who will take the risk of delay and accidents in the post. So you may refer to the case of NHS against Bell. Against, it stated that the acceptance was complete as against the proposer when the letter was put in a course of transmissions to him so as to be out of the power of the acceptor. So at the moment acceptor posted his acceptance, the acceptor cannot do anything, right? Okay, the scope of the postal rule, it applies to telegrams sent through post by means of post service. But instantaneous communications such as telephone, telex are governed by the general rule. Okay, and SMS, WhatsApp, it governs by general rule. Okay, you may refer to the case of Interest Limited against Miles Ford East Corporation. Okay, so the question here is any exclusions to the effect of the postal rule. What do you think? Whether you can exclude yourself from using the effects of the postal rule? Yes, okay, if as the proposer you put the adequate protection. Okay, for example, okay, you stipulate in your proposal that acceptance is only complete upon receipt of the letter. Meaning to say that at the moment a proposer receive the letter, then there is a complete acceptance. Okay, so you may put the adequate clause in your proposal. Alright, last but not least is we are going to look into the revocations. Okay, just now we discussed on the proposal, acceptance, so whether there is any way to revoke the proposal and acceptance. Alright, for revocation of proposal, you may refer to section 5, subsection 1 of the Contracts Act. A proposal may be revoked at any time before communication of its acceptance is complete as against the proposer, but not afterwards. So based on section 5, subsection 1, acceptor, the proposer may revoke his proposal at any time before the acceptor make his acceptance. At the moment the acceptor posted his acceptance, then proposer cannot revoke his proposal. So methods to revoke the proposal based on section 6 by giving notice of revocation, lapse of time prescribed or lapse of reasonable time, failure of the acceptor to fulfill the condition of the proposal, by death or mental disorder of the proposer. Okay, for revocation of acceptance, refer to section 5, subsection 2 of the Contracts Act. An acceptance may be revoked at any time before the communication of the acceptance is complete as against the acceptor, but not afterwards. So similarly, acceptor may revoke his acceptance before the proposer receives his acceptance. At the moment the proposer receives his acceptance, then acceptor cannot revoke his acceptance. He cannot withdraw his acceptance. Okay, so you may refer to illustration to section 5. Okay, when A and B agreed to use post as their means of communication. So A proposed by letter sent by post to sell his house to B, and B accepts the proposal by letter sent by post. So now B already made acceptance against a proposal. So B may revoke his acceptance at any time before or at the moment when the letter communicating it reached A but not afterwards. So in this case, acceptor B may revoke his acceptance before A receive his acceptance. Okay, I hope that you understand the revocation of proposal and acceptance, and please refer to this case Bryan against Steenhoven 1880. Alright, so we end our lecture. We have discussed two elements of offer and acceptance. If you have any question, if you confuse the rules, okay, the rules of acceptance, postal rule, proposal, and so on, please ask me as soon as possible. Thank you guys for your kind attention. Assalamualaikum.